This podcast is powered by Zencastr. My guest on today's podcast is Avi Pryntz-Nadworny, also known on social media as Avi the Amazing. His pronouns are he, him, his. Avi is an award-winning photographer, circus artist, and CODA, child of deaf adults. Growing up in Rochester, New York, Avi spent his youth bouncing between a fascination with animation and a playful obsession with juggling and gymnastics. That interest eventually brought him to Academy of Art University in San Francisco, where he studied graphic design and new media before the lack of physical movement prompted him to audition for École du Cirque du Québec in Quebec City, Canada. After 2 years of intensive training, he landed a job with Cirque du Soleil and began working as an acrobat on fire juggler in Les Chemins Invisibles. After the show ended, he traveled to Italy to study tumbling in Cirque at FLIC Scuola di Circo. A few years later, he moved back to the USA to join the international touring company Push Physical Theater, where he worked for 8 years as a performer and choreographer. In parallel to his international performing career, he worked on photo and video shoots. Soon, what started as a few odd jobs and turned into a passion to create images and video with some of the world's best circus artists, dancers, and Grammy Award-winning artists. Avi currently resides in Rochester, New York, and runs the media production company Photo Prints. When he is not running Photo Prints, performing, or working on his book, he can be found directing, lecturing at universities, and volunteering for the organization Deaf Refugee Advocacy. You can connect with Avi through his websites, photoprints.com, beyondthecircustent.com, and on social media on Instagram at Avi the Amazing and on Facebook at PhotoPrints. Thank you so much, Avi, for coming on to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Shenea. This is a huge honor, really. You do some incredible work. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Avi. It's such a pleasure to have you on the Live Like an Acrobat podcast. Really, it is. Like, we got the opportunity to meet at the Rochester Fringe Festival a few months ago, which was amazing. I was working with Matt Morgan out of Las Vegas, and he is fabulous. He decided and chose to have an all-female circus lineup for his show, which was fabulous. It was, I think, one of the only times I've ever experienced that before, where all of the circus artists in the show were all women. So it was really great. It was really great. And he also, too, had two women of color. He had a Black woman, me, and he had Zinabek, who's from Ethiopia, which was also really huge. So we had the diversity, inclusion, representation happening on many, many levels. Which was wonderful. And you actually did the videography for a lot of that as well for the Rochester Fringe Festival. And I also got to work with you, Avi, doing a wonderful photo shoot. You are exquisite in your photography and in your vision. As well as also too within your circusing. But I had a wonderful time doing kind of like a guerrilla style all over Rochester, New York. For those listening in, we had a great time. We didn't have a lot of time to get the photo shoot in, but what we were able to do, because Avi was so prepared, you have the brilliant perspective of being a physical artist yourself, which is so important. And it's very rare to work with a photographer who's also a circus artist. So yeah, how is that entire dynamic for you, Avi? And how was it doing Rochester Fringe and experiencing that this year during such very interesting times?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, so the Fringe Festival was just an absolute delight, especially after the previous year as everything was canceled. So it was so nice to see things in person again, and especially circus. Rochester, since Ringling sort of shut down, doesn't really get much circus. So like Matt and Heidi's little burst of circus every year is my little local joy. And so since I think they came to Rochester back near the beginning of the Fringe Festival, I've been trying to connect with the artists who come through and doing photo shoots with them. So that's like one of the highlights of my year is able to like connect with just wonderful, wonderful people, because Matt and Heidi just bring the best people in who are as talented as like you at the technical discipline, but also just like genuinely wonderful people who are just a delight to talk to and just have a meal or photograph. I get to show them a bit of Rochester, and I really enjoy that. So yeah, Fringe was great. Yeah. What was the other question?
Well, just the other question was doing our photo shoot. I know that will potentially be a part of your upcoming book that you're working on as well. And I think it's interesting too. I think performing in Fringe Festival and then doing Fringe in different capacities and ways like you get to do them. I think it's just really great to do that in so many different perspectives that you get on Circus and on events in that way, because you're not just like in it, but you're like in it and around it. And I also want to tell everyone I got the chance to meet one of Avi's brothers because he comes from an incredibly talented family. Nephews are incredibly talented bunch. Let me just tell you, they've got the personality, the pizzazz, the talent, the accoutrement, the everything, all the words that I say incorrectly with my I know my accent. I apologize to you on the bio. To all of those listening in, I do my best. Sometimes the pronunciations aren't the best.
No, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. Like, I've been involved in movement like pretty much my whole life. Like my parents met Israeli folk dancing. So they met dancing. And then growing up, I did dancing, and I have three younger brothers, and they all do some sort of movement in a serious way, working down the line. Like one of them currently is very involved in the acro yoga community and teaches in Hawaii right now. The other was a professional ballet dancer for many years. And then the youngest, who you had the pleasure of meeting, Doriel, is a internationally renowned Lindy Hopper, and as well as a great barber and an annoying little brother. But yeah, so growing up, like I was surrounded by that, and Rochester has a great juggling community. So there was huge influences in my life were like Wes and Jeff Peden. Wes Peden, for those of the who are listening who are not in the juggling community, is a huge name, international name in juggling, and has done some wonderful things for the juggling community. And I think all those influences sort of like informed how I looked at images, right? And it was just this whole thing. And I kind of took it for granted that like I just assumed every photographer looks at movement and circus this way. Until I was modeling for some photographers who were amazing but hadn't shot much movement. And I could just hear by the press of their shutter button that they weren't getting the shot. It drove me crazy because I think I was doing like saltos or some sort of flips where it's like, I can't do 100 of them in a row if you're going to keep missing it, and it's going to look like I'm just pooping in the air. And I was like, oh, I guess this is harder than I thought it was. And wonderful people like you have come out of the woodwork, just like complimenting my photography. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I'm okay at this then. Yeah.
More than okay. And that's a really big deal. You know, I've worked with so many photographers over the years, and it is, you have to give a lot of direction, usually when you're working with photographers that don't know movement. And even if they do know movement, they don't know circus, because it's still such a niche thing. And you come out of it hoping that you got like maybe like one good photo out of the entire bunch, and it can be incredibly exhausting to repeat your skills over and over again. But I want to let listeners know, like Avi is so succinct. He has a vision. He knows what he's looking for. And I also like Avi, where you're coming from, where you're going for an organic kind of feel to how we express ourselves as circus artists, because of course we can be very structured and very strategic and have our different looks that we give and our little, flair and our ways of doing things. But you've also tried to dismantle that within your photography, which I think is also really beautiful, and a different take on photography that most of us are trying to do, because we're usually just trying to get the shot, right? With circus, it's like, get the shot, get the pose, get the technique. Sometimes most people don't realize, sometimes a photo might look good, but technically it actually isn't suitable for us to be able to put out there into the world for our community or for people that are going to hire us. So sometimes, something that ends up looking very artistic could maybe be the thing that you don't want to use to push your business. But then sometimes the thing that is super artistic, that's not a skill, is the thing that could also get you the job. So it kind of goes back and forth, but we can be a little bit, I think precious with our photos, and overly critical too, because sometimes we'll take away a little bit of the art for the sake of the technique of the trick, for example, in the photo.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, yeah, and it's such a balancing act. No pun intended.
No.
Uh, but really, like, because I think as circus artists, and there is so much time put into a single trick, like a hand balancer or it's like we spend unhealthy amount of hours obsessing over this one shape, right?
Yes.
And so we're just emotionally invested in that. So if you're going to a photographer who doesn't understand the technique and doesn't see that you're stacked over your arm in a handstand, or that like your body's just slightly off in your posture when you're juggling, or whatever it is, you can't send that to other peers who will immediately look at it and be like, well, you're not stacked, you're falling out of the handstand. Like something like that is devastating when the photographer's like, oh, it's great because the lighting is here and your costume is here, or other things. There's I find tropes, or like just the nuances and styles of certain angles of a shot where it's like the juggler being shot from above and looking up at the camera is just so is a very common trope, and being able to come at it from the side of having been in the industry for many years, and having to like apply to agents and festivals and seeing what that flavor is, and then to come at it from the photography with that knowledge and being like, okay, I'm not going to repeat the same thing that everyone else did. How do we still find an angle that's attractive and showcases the skill, but also like adds the originality and uniqueness of that artist?
I love that. I love bringing that out. I love that you strive to bring out those qualities, because we are also, interestingly unique. And I also, too, again, was just very, very happy, of being included with what you are working on as well, as a Black artist. Having another brown body out there photographed. We're not always the ones that are sought out as readily for photographs. Which again, it continues to be an ongoing topic that I, bring up and speak to. And so I'm very grateful to have been included in that. And speaking about that,
Thank
because
you. Yeah.
there's a lot of photographers out there that, do not have a lot of Black and brown bodies in their work. And so I know everyone is striving to be more inclusive and have more representation, and seeking out more artists of color to add to their shoots. And very popular photographers, I have taken very big issue with seeing their feeds and the lack of artists of color in their photo shoots, where they have millions and millions of followers, which I'm looking forward to that continuing to change and to shift.
Yeah.
And I know, Avi, too, that is something that you are very aware of. And I appreciate that with all the conversations and different things that we've spoken about. And, with circus rights also, too, and just in infusing more representation and, a stronger collective within circus, which is what we're all striving to do with having more representation in that way. And that kind of like leads into as well what we were speaking about a bit earlier before we got on to the podcast, Avi, which is, I was also too most recently working with Omnium Circus, which is a striving to be an inclusive circus, and we were performing at Gallaudet University, which is the most prominent deaf university, I believe. And there was also there as well, which is kind of like a side note, but an all deaf Starbucks, which is the only one existence, which was fascinating. It was fascinating. I was very much immersed in deaf culture before I arrived here in Chicago. That was in DC, for those that are not familiar with that. And Avi, as being informed, heavily immersed in deaf culture, you said that your first language actually is American Sign Language, and your second language is American English. And to me, again, those are all the different parts of accessibility and inclusivity that we're speaking about within the circus world. And it was a beautiful experience working with deaf artists in Omnium, a bold new circus, and being immersed again into deaf culture and into how how many layers there are to deaf culture. I won't speak on it too much. I only speak from what I know and what I've been told and what I was privileged to learn and understand while I was there. But it was a very beautiful experience to see the different ways in which you can engage and which you can learn from one another. And so I would love to also understand how that's informed your overall experience as an artist, as an animator, as a photographer, as a videographer. I mean, as all the hats that you wear, Avi, being just so exceptionally gifted and so lovely.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. So like you said, I grew up, my mom's deaf, my dad's hearing. Um, I grew up, and this is fairly common because children's motor skills develop before the vocal cords. And intellectually, as a young child, you're hungry, you want milk, or you're tired, or whatever it is, but you just physically can't express it with your vocal cords. So signing is just so much easier. So like at the age of like 1.5, 2, I had like a couple hundred word vocabulary. Um, and then my mom and dad were very involved in the deaf community. My dad currently teaches at the National Technical Institute for the Deaf in Rochester. Um, and so you mentioned Gallaudet University, which is the deaf university. Rochester has, I believe, still the largest deaf per capita in the U.S. So there's a huge deaf population here in Rochester.
Wow.
Yeah. And so growing up, just friends and children, like my whole house, like we sign in the house, and that's a big part of who I am and how my brain sort of functions. If you're watching this podcast instead of listening, I'm gesturing with my hands, and that is a very common thing. I've nearly poked out many people's eyes while I talk. But yeah, so it's been an interesting thing because I was very involved with it in Rochester, and then when I sort of went out to study in San Francisco and then go up to Quebec and then over to Europe, I was kind of disconnected from the deaf community, and it was something I felt lacking. It was just like a low key thing. Like I just missed that. I remember being at a juggling festival in Italy and waiting in line to get in and paying for my ticket and hearing something up ahead, and it was a deaf juggler from France who had come to Italy to do this thing, to watch and participate in the festival, but there was a language barrier thing, and I immediately leapt up. And now FSL and ASL are kind of similar. For those of so every country has their own sign language, and it's not like there's a international. I mean, it's sort of like Esperanto. Nobody speaks Esperanto. International sign language isn't quite a thing, but there are like the etymology of sign language. So FSL, French Sign Language, heavily influences American Sign Language. So it's very easy for me to speak to someone from France or Belgium in sign language. But if I went to England, I could not understand a single word. Like it's completely different, which blows people's minds. But like I had an easier time talking with some deaf people I met when I was performing in China than in London. Now, thankfully, America's such a big presence, and everyone knows English, and so some people know a bit of ASL or whatnot. But just like encountering Nico, who is the deaf juggler, who's an incredible juggler in Italy, it was just like lit up part of my brain. I was like, this is what I've been missing for a couple of years, being on tour and traveling. And I actually brought him to Rochester. Rochester is a huge juggling festival every year, and we were able to book him and bring him in to perform at RIT/NTID, which I was very excited about.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really phenomenal and beautiful. I wanted to ask you too, Avi, what do you think is missing in terms of full accessibility for deaf culture within Circus? In terms of being an artist, in terms of being an audience member, what are the things that the circus industry does not do, and what is not given enough over for the audience to be able to enjoy circus, to be able to experience circus in the most respectable way, because it's fascinating to me.
That's a good question. I would say definitely talk to deaf people. right? Like that's like the big thing. I am hearing, and I'm in the deaf community somewhat. Like that's the first step people should take. But from my just limited experience and being around friends and family, there's just a huge. Language barrier is a huge one, right? Most theaters and venues have a handicap ramp, right? It's just like, oh yeah, of course, yeah, people should be allowed to get into the theater. The same consideration is not applied to visual or auditory quite as vigorously, I think. So, yeah, just thinking about if you're doing a more contemporary show that has dial. Oh, we lost my camera. Where should we take it from?
We're back.
Okay. Yeah, so I think language is a huge one. Just thinking about providing interpreters.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Hey, it's Shenea. Enjoying the podcast? Wondering how I make it? If you ever want to start a podcast or make and edit video content, Zencastr is the best tool for newbies and professionals. Easy to use, phenomenal audio and video quality beyond, and a free trial. Join the podcast community at Zencastr.com, and don't forget to use my code Zencastr-Shenea Stiletto for 30% off your first 3 months of professional podcasting. The link is in the description of this episode. And now, back to the show. Please, Avi, continue with your beautiful, 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 I would say, description and, helping us to understand how circus can be more accessible for the deaf community as performers and as audience members.
Yeah. So I think just captioning, having interpreters is a huge thing. If you're going to have any speaking or sounds that are critical in the music, like you just think as a hearing audience member, even if you're not speaking your act, but there's lyrics that provide some sort of context or tint to your act, that's something that a deaf audience member is completely gets lost on. So just thinking about everything, all the nuances that we hear, and if it's going to be noticed by a hearing audience member, it should be also noticed or highlighted for a deaf audience member as well, from that point. And then the huge thing I hear, and this is more for performing and interacting with the deaf community, is there's just so many people who are like, oh, sign language is so beautiful. I really should learn that. And people say that, but very few people actually go through the effort of learning even just the alphabet, like something that is fairly simple, 26 letters that can immediately help and make please, thank you, like just the simplest things really won't take you that long. And yes, it feels awkward for anyone to learn a new language and try it out. For sure, you're vulnerable and stuff, but it just makes a huge effort in trying to connect with other people. And so like that's the biggest thing from the just like interacting, performing, or working with is just take that risk and put in that little time, because it makes a huge difference in bringing us all closer together as people. And there are so many incredible deaf people I know that I wish more of my hearing colleagues and friends were fluent, so they could truly, like, without an interpreter, just experience their beauty and intelligence directly.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I oftentimes, I was thinking that when we were at Gallaudet, there was the different heads of faculty and such. They were They were just phenomenal human beings. I mean, phenomenal. And even, with the interpreters and using them, but like you were saying as well too, Avi, the feeling that I would have to be able to express more and to be able to connect better and to speak better with them, and how powerful that would be. But I also wanted to say, when we were doing rehearsals, for example, and with the other deaf performers, we had visible face masks on so that they could read lips as much as possible. We had to, again, remember consistently to pull down our face mask in situations and in spaces to make sure that everyone was included and could understand and read what we were saying by reading lips. And so those were little things that we had to consistently make sure that we did as a natural kind of default setting, to make sure that everyone understood what was happening in the context of the conversation within the rehearsal. And Omnium tried to incorporate several different things, and again, took every single cue from the deaf performers and let them lead the way for what they felt they wanted and what they needed. And then we all did our best, day in and day out, to make sure that we would do that. And then we would apologize profusely. If anything, if anybody did feel left out, or if we didn't get to it quick enough, or just, repeating ourselves in different ways, and then learning certain symbols to sign with, I learned the symbol for circus.
Yeah.
Yes, which
That's
I just
great.
signed away from listening in on the podcast. And I do have like a thank you, which, again, is a beautiful thing, even if that seems very small, which Avi was saying that is not small, because I got it reflected back to me several times that every single deaf person I encountered with was happy that I used even just one sign, but we can do better. And they were reminding us consistently throughout our rehearsals and throughout our performances for Omnium that we can all do better. So I take that in, Avi, and I'm very grateful to have you on the show to be able to express the needs, and the sensitivities, and the desires and the wants, and the accommodations that should be lawful. We've been speaking about laws as well when I was there with the deaf community, about certain things that people think are a part of the law, but they're not necessarily, where people have to have a ramp, or they have to have certain things, and then you find out like, oh, you don't really have to have that, or it's very ambiguous.
Yeah, the ADA.
It's not as direct and specific, directed towards the needs of the deaf culture that you would think that it is. If I'm saying that appropriately, Avi, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and again, I just want to emphasize that I shouldn't be the voice of deaf Americans in any way. This is just my perspective as a CODA. But just like witnessing my mom's struggles and stuff, and having conversations. So like the American Disability Act, ADA, has a bunch of stuff in place. And so like we were just having a conversation about this, and this is a huge, like much more global than Circus, but conversation about, so if you or a government agency or get any government funding, you were required to have an interpreter there if one is requested for a deaf person. But say you are a teeny nonprofit who like has no money, everyone's volunteers. Legally, if you are required, if you get any sort of government funding, to provide an interpreter. But the government, there's no grants that I know of or anyone I've really chatted about that has funding for that. So you have this catch-22 where it's like there's no money, but you're legally obligated, and it puts the pressure on the small organization, which can be tough, especially if you don't have a lot of experience with deaf people. So you don't know in the beginning of the year to budget or allocate funding for that accessibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
So which is, again, it's just like more awareness and accessibility is such a great thing. And I also wanted to jump back to what you were talking about. First of all, awesome. That's so great that you were all learning sign language and really taking efforts. It's definitely, if you haven't grown up with it, it's like shifting your brain around a lot for that, and just like, where you're standing, right? That's just a simple thing. Don't stand with your like backlit. Stand with your feet. Like, 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 stand right? Because then you're a silhouette and just communicate, like simple things like that hearing people generally don't think about. But I wanted to just touch on reading lips, because misconception that I find a lot is everyone's like, oh, you're deaf, but your mom's really good at reading lips. And the thing about lip reading is you only get about 30% of what someone's saying. Even if you are the best lip reader in the world, the amount of shapes your mouth makes isn't that much of a variety. It's like something's inside with your tongue moving. So if you try to eliminate every like 30% of something, so it's just a constant guesswork. Even if someone's facing you and they're well lit and you're reading their lips, it's just a huge headache over time to communicate. So I just want to emphasize to people, if you're listening or unfamiliar, that like lip reading isn't enough. Even if this person you're communicating with is great at it, because they're just like, it's like getting a text and missing every third word, and then trying to figure out what what they're trying to say. And to do that for 8 hours a day, or if you're in a stressful situation, if you're throwing a show together, right? You're all in rehearsals. There's enough stress on just like the baseline of remember your choreography, what's the side of stage you're going to be on, try not to land on your head, to then add in just that the communication is exhausting. I'm sure some of us have experienced that working in other countries, right? Where it's like I've done shows like with Cirque, where it's like these meetings are in French and then these meetings are in Italian or whatever it is. And you're like, your brain just hurts after that. Yeah.
Yes, totally does. Thank you for explaining that. That is so important. It's so profound. And I'm really grateful to have that expression and that explanation on the podcast, because it's learning for all of us. And we all have so much to continuously learn from each other, which again is what brings us closer together. The more we understand and learn about one another, the better we are to be able to help one another and put things into action and put things into to real change, I think. I wanted to say also, too, my other prominent experience that I had while doing circus with the deaf community was with the Deaf Olympics. And a lot of people don't know that there is an actual Deaf Olympics. And it was a really, really, really incredible experience. I did the opening ceremony for the Deaf Olympics, and that was also another experience that I had in circus that was very moving, especially someone like me that has a history in gymnastics and my background and such in that ways, and having friends and such a part of the Olympic community and movement. But it is a very, very precious movement within the Deaf Olympics, and I learned a lot when I was there as well. And that was with Cirque du Soleil, and that was several years ago in Taipei, in Taiwan. And it was an experience that I've never forgotten. I look forward to there being more experiences in this way, which I know that there will be moving forward, because people again are taking the reins and being more responsible with how they represent different communities within circus. I also too, Avi, wanted to cycle back around to your book that you are working on with your photography, and how and what that will be like, and what your ethos is for your book. And then afterwards, I'd like to speak just a little bit as well about how you went from animation as your focus to joining and running away with the circus, because I was just with someone who kind of did the opposite of what you did. They were I was with the broom juggler from the Cirque du Soleil show Idis that was kind of short-lived in LA, and he went from doing that to now being in the, I think, like tech more community, and has now stopped circus. So he
really, oh my gosh, yes. He does all the contact room stuff, right?
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yes,
Love his stuff.
Yeah.
Just adore
it.
Small. Yes. So sorry, I got excited about contact room stuff, and the questions went right out of my brain. So you were asking me first about my book. So let's start with that. So this book that I'm working on is called Beyond the Circus Tent. And it is a mixture of, it's essentially a photo book, but has a lot of text in it as well. And the concept behind it stemmed from just my personal experience as a circus artist from America in particular, and having conversations with other artists and then having conversations with relatives who are not as knowledgeable about circus arts, or people that I just meet at parties or bars or whatever, and thinking just really heavily about how just the stereotypes and two-dimensionality of that was being put onto me, or just performance in general. And this is something I think that is also informed by the aesthetic and in traditional circus and big circuses in general. Is you in general, I feel a lot of shows put you on as a character, right? You have your costume, and you're not Shenea Stiletto, you're not Avi Pryntz-Nadworny, you're Avi the Amazing or whatever. You're the juggler, and the juggler is an amazing juggler, but you don't really think. Does he have any siblings? Has he lost any loved ones? Like, does he have IBS? Like it's just like you are a single thing the rest of your life. Yeah, right. Whatever it is gone. And then I would see a lot of circus photos. I have some like good friends who are also circus artists and do photography, and we were chatting and seeing stuff, and I felt that they were lacking a little bit of the identity of the person. And there was one day I was in Italy, and I was going to the supermarket to buy something, and one of the living statues who had been working like at one of the piazzas came in to buy like cereal or something. But there was this lovely juxtaposition of like this character from the stage, from performing, doing the everyday stuff. And I just loved that. We are all people. There's so much to us. And I really wanted to put that into the photos a bit more. So I really started working on photographing people wearing their favorite clothing, like something that's just like comfy and very much them rather than the costume. I wanted like whatever makeup, if you wore makeup, that was very much made you feel like you, rather than like, this is my face and I'm going to spend 2 hours like grading like a full Cirque face or something like that.
And it is 2 hours.
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. The first time like I had to do that. It took forever. Looked like, can we swear? Sorry. Okay. It looked like shit. Yeah. Yeah. It was a disaster. But yeah, so there was that side of it. Kind of started with the aesthetic, where I really wanted to do that, and then also pay tribute to the million hours that we spend doing this stupid thing, like trying to figure out how to balance on one arm, or keep 7 to 9 balls in the air. It's like something like, if I put that into like, I don't know, anything else, I could have helped like mow every lawn in the greater Rochester area in the amount of time or something. It's just like the amount of time I've tried to keep 7 balls in the air. So there was something that I really wanted to pay tribute to that, because it's a huge part of our identity. It's like, I spend 8 hours a day doing this thing. And I want to acknowledge that, but there's also this huge other part of my personality and culture and everything that is equally as important. And trying to showcase that in a very respectful way, balancing both of those, is the goal of my book. And then the next level down from that is I've been starting to interview a lot of the subjects. I know a picture. The picture is worth 1,000 words, but it's nice to have 1,000 words and the picture, so you get the 2,000 words. Just about identity and how circus connects with that. I had a lovely interview with this contortionist based out in Vegas, Lisbeth, and we were just chatting about just the little things about just being so focused on symmetry in your body that you alternate going up the stairs with your right leg on one side. Next time it's the left leg, just to make sure you're not like having imbalance. So then when you're doing a triple fold, it's screwing you up. And then just how that conscious focus of your discipline informs your life. she was saying that she coaches a lot of students, and we were chatting about mental health and anxiety and panic attacks and this feeling of not being able to breathe. And there was this beautiful story about she was talking about how the feeling of doing a triple fold or a chest stand, and that weight, the physical weight being on your chest, is very similar to a panic attack. And being able to train this circus thing and then have it and actually lessen the effects because you're training this thing was something that she noticed with some of her students as well. And I thought that was just such a beautiful thing that not everyone, this is a huge generalization, but people tend to look at the photos I photograph of contortionists and it's the ew thing, like ew, like the broken body, like thing. And it's like instantly by putting this little story or perspective and like the depth in it, just like makes you appreciate it so much more. And I kind of wanted to bring that to the general public. It's not just like a weird freaky person sitting on their own head. Like there's a huge, like you can get into the history of contortion and there's so much beautiful history and like you can go down that rabbit hole, but just the little thing that makes it personal and ties into their identity in certain ways. I just really like that and kind of wanted to add that into the book as well. But it's really just, it's called Beyond the Circus Tent. And that's because I really wanted to remove us from that stage, take away the makeup, take away the special lights, and just sort of show the beautiful, quirky, weird human that is behind all that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And that's the kind of ethos that I have for the Live Like an Acrobat podcast is I want people to hear the humanity of who we are as circus artists and as circus performers. And I love that there are so many of us that are dedicated to that now moving forward and wanting to show the different sides to us, because I always say the more that people understand the humanity of us, the more that they can support us in ways that maybe they wouldn't have been able to before, just seeing us as artists and, kind of as these like monoliths on stage that are, not human or superhuman, and reminding people that we are just human and, we have our different quirks. And I was speaking to the creator and founder of Teatro Zinzanni, Norman Langale, the other day, and he was speaking about how, people would love to hear about the different things that you like and the different things that you don't like just within your day, and how that's, a really interesting thing. He's like, yes, they kind of want to hear about the shows. He's like, but people like to know, like how do you sleep? And, what is your favorite color? Like, what is that show that you like to watch? Do you watch TV? That can inform, that can connect you to people, because sometimes audiences think that, we don't have as much in common as we do, but we do. We're all just people and just, exploring something that we love and having, obviously the privilege and, to be able to do that, because, but it is also too a career that I remind people that we work very hard for. It doesn't just come to you. And it's not for the faint of heart, which I remind people as well, having a freelance circus career. And I think that kind of ties into my next question for you, Avi, of how you moved from being an animator and that being your goal to, moving and branching out to becoming a circus artist. I will ask you, why would you do such a thing? And then
Why?
I would ask you, why wouldn't you do such a thing?
Oh.
As being a circus performer. So how did that happen, and why, and how do you feel about the decisions and things that you made, which are obviously, changeable, and they evolve, just as I have evolved and evolved into a lot of different stratospheres within the circus industry anyway, not just being an artist, but many things.
Yeah. So, I'll keep it short because this is like a 45-minute story in and of itself. So my father is a third-generation magician. My great-grandfather was a magician and photographer in New York City back 1910s or something like that. And it skipped a generation, and then he taught my dad, and my dad paid for college by doing magic shows and stuff like that. It was a whole thing. So I, as a young child, remember being vanished. Like I'd have to go up on stage and there'd be the box and then I would disappear, kind of a thing. And stuff like that. So there was like a bit of performing, but I loved animation. I saw this super obscure film, The Wizard of Speed and Time, when I was like 5 or 6 or 7, and it's all stop motion, and it made a huge impact on me. And so I started making little Lego animations and creating films and stuff, and that was my focus. I just loved that. Like obviously, I did other things as well. I juggled. Um, I did gymnastics for several years because I really wanted to learn how to do a backflip off the wall because I thought that would be cool. And I was very fortunate enough to have some wonderful, um, amazing coaches. Ivo, I forget his full name. But was on the like Bulgarian national team champions. Kind of just happened to be in Rochester and willing to teach recreational gymnastics to some regard instead of like they'd be teaching the teams, and then I was like, I want to learn how to do a backflip off the wall. So I was doing this stuff in tandem. But animation was my heart and soul. I was obsessed with Pixar and um, took college classes when I was a teenager at a local college, Alfred State College, in 3D animation. The professor was so generous to let me sit in on all the classes for free. I would like he didn't report to the school. I just went in and sat down and he gave me the book, and all the students thought I was a college student, even though I was like 15 at the time, and took like associate's degree worth of animation classes, which I was so fortunate and just like privileged to have that opportunity. Um, yeah, Larry Newberger was super generous. Anyway, so that happened, and I was sort of at a pivotal point when I was 18 or 19. Should I do more physical theater, dance, or animation? And I decided to go to San Francisco because the San Francisco Circus Center's there with some wonderful coaches, as well as Academy of Art University, which had a connection with Pixar. And I was like, great, I can do full-time college, and then in my free time, Chinese acrobatics. Turns out that was not sustainable. Time-wise or physically, my body, oh my gosh. I did not know what hit me. That was a wonderful time. But so I was going to college full-time and studying animation, and then deciding to sort of switch to graphic design and filmmaking, new media, just because it's a bit more marketable internationally rather than having to be stuck in like one of the hubs for animation. And a dear friend of mine from Rochester, who I mentioned before, Wes Peden, he went to DOC in Sweden, the Circus School in Stockholm. And that sort of set in motion the back of my mind, maybe this is something I could do as well. And so I was looking around and trying to find something that was a more intensive program. And I had to look outside the US at the time. There wasn't too much. And there were a lot of really good jugglers at École Nationale, not École Nationale, École de Cirque de Québec, as well as national. But so I decided to take an LOA from college and just sort of try this out. And my parents were super supportive. I was like, I'm just going to stop after a year and try this out. And so I auditioned for the Circus School up there and got rejected. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to move up here and train for a year just to show them I'm dedicated. I was like, you know what? I didn't speak any French at the time, no Quebecois. It was, yeah. And so I found from the audition, like the boyfriend of someone who's at the audition needed a roommate. So I just moved up there, got like a teeny apartment. I think it was like, my bedroom was like a meter by 2.5 meters. So it was like a closet. And I just lived up there and worked a little doing under the table like video work to sort of pay for stuff, and was at the circus school every day. There were classes in the evening, like that was the formal classes, but I would sneak into the basement and train during the day. And there's a funny story because the students there thought I was matriculated because I was there all the time and just not in their classes. And I was like, no, I just like lived there and trained for a year and studied dance at the dance school there. And I just loved it. I was like, okay, this is it. The animation is great, but I need to do the moving and physical stuff when I'm young. The mouse and keyboard stuff, there's no real physical requirement on this. And I just fell into that. yeah, and it's been a beautiful sort of harmony of both evolving together. I really view it now. Um, I'm a storyteller is how I
Mm,
view it, right? Because it's like the animation, um, the 8 years I did doing physical theater with Push, the filmmaking I've done, the photography, all of that is doing the same thing, which is just saying something, and it's just using a different medium. And so that's really how I view myself as a person and an artist. It's just using these different mediums to say things.
mm, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Avi. It's just been such a pleasure to have you on the Live Like an Acrobat podcast. You are so amazing. I'm just so grateful that you are in this circus world and in the circus industry, and then just in the world, just in general. You have such a beautiful, poetic perspective on this industry and how you see art and movement and how you see people. I wanted to ask you to close out this episode of the podcast, just what last thoughts you might have on the industry, Avi, and what you're thinking, what's close to your heart right now within the circus industry, what is hitting close to home for you right now, whatever you'd like to say and leave our audience with.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Easy question.
Super easy.
Yeah.
Sound
Yeah. I mean, I just really feel for so many of my colleagues and friends right now, and sending love to everyone. Just it's a really tough time, and has been for all of us for almost 2 years now, and still feels very unstable and unpredictable. And I'm sure everyone's going through so much stress. Um, so I just I wish my empathy would help, like could actually do something. Um, uh, so I'm just yeah, that's the big thing right now, with Omicron sort of just shooting up, and chatting with friends, being like, I don't know if my cruise contract's going to be canceled. Maybe I have to deliver pizzas on bicycles again. Um, right. And there's that, but there's also so much beauty and wonderful stuff I'm seeing as well. So much creativity, people sharing things on the websites or social media, beautiful little gems that are coming out of this, that gives me sort of hope and uh, joy, for the future. Right, it's people are finding uh, beautiful ways to take the sort of garbage and shit that we are given and sculpted it into wonderful or thought-provoking or challengingness. And yeah, and I'm just grateful of like everyone taking these last 2 years to really have these conversations, right? To reach out and talk about the accessibility or inequality, the things that have existed for forever. And it's like, yo, now that it's not, we're sitting in it. So it's like, okay, let's talk about why are there no like leads of color in circus productions in like that are available. I look at all the wonderful circus posters I see on the wall, and it's just like all these white cis straight people, and it's like, okay, where's the representation we need to uh, amplify? Yeah, I'll end on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Avi. And I also, too, just wanted to second that of for the circus community that we are with you. We're all in this together. We understand that it's hard. And I want to remind people that the American Circus Alliance, which I am a part of their advocacy committee, we just recently had meetings with two sitting senators, Senator Padilla of California, Senator Lujan of New Mexico, in pushing the SARA bill, which is the Creative Economy Revitalization Act, which would do wonders for circus performers. We are also working on getting circus recognized through Congress as an official art form, which would also do wonders. So we are also within this doing the best that we can. And I will remind people, write to your congressmen, write to your senators. We very much need GOP support. And so if you are in a state or in a city that has Republican representation, those are the congressmen and the senators that we are vying for to push for the SARA bill, which was in the Build Back Better bill that did not go through. So I want to remind you that that's how they were seeking to push through the SARA bill. And so it definitely needs more support. And if you have a voice, not if you have a voice, but you do have a voice, you can write a letter. You can call your senator. You can call your congressman. I do it all the time and have been for years. Call them. Speak for yourself. Speak for the circus community. We deserve funds. That will be $300 million worth of grants and funds for performing arts, and hopefully specifically for circus performers. So there is a there, and we just need to continue to advocate and vouch for ourselves. So thank you again, and I will leave you with this podcast was recorded on Zencastr, and the Live Like an Acrobat podcast is also available on Circus Talk, the inclusive, independent, and international online network for the circus industry. Circus Talk's mission is to create a level playing field for this industry and democratize access to information. Thank you again for joining the Live Like an Acrobat podcast, listening in with my guest who is truly, truly amazing, Avi the Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shenea.